Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video. Today I'm doing a review of the 8th Doctor Time War box set Volume 1. This is my first Big Finish audio review of 2019, my third box set review in total so far, and as I say, the first review of the 8th Doctor Time War box sets, because it is a series. So the box that all 4 stories come in is pretty nice cover. You've got the 8th Doctor there, as played by Paul McGann. You've got like this one Dalek there, then you've got the TARDIS in the background, and then you've got what I assume is Bliss with like a rifle, as well as a bloom on the Doctor as well, which is quite important to a certain story in the box set, as well as a Gallifreyan soldier, some Daleks in the sky, as well as a Dalek battleship and Dalek sort of sorcery type thing, or like a flying Dalek type thing. And you've got just a sort of similar sort of stuff on the spine and that, and then on the back you've got bio of the story, as well as the 4 stories and who they're written by and who directed the whole box set and stuff. So that was just the first box, or the box even. The first story in the 8th Doctor Time War box set includes, it starts with Starship of Theus, by John Dorney, which you've got the 8th Doctor there, you've got Bliss, you've got like this blown up like Dalek almost, and this spaceship, and then a Dalek sorcerer as well, and the Sonics there, and then you've still got the banner as well with the 8th Doctor there, Doctor Who, the 8th Doctor Time War 1, Paul McGann, and then the person who I assume who plays Bliss, as well as Starship of Theus, by John Dorney, because that's who wrote the story. And then you've got the usual, which is a case of the disc with the sort of cover almost printed on, as well as cast notes and writer's notes. Oh no, it doesn't come with any writer's notes. And then you've just got the bio and all description on the back, and when this box set was released back in 2017, as well as how long the story is, which is an hour. Each of the stories are an hour long. And I mean, Starship of Theus, it's probably the weakest story of the box set, which is a shame considering that it starts off the box set. It tries to be 3 different things, and from what I have listened to of the behind the scenes special feature disc that you get as well with this box set, I only listened to a bit of that before starting to review this box set now. But one thing John Dorney did say about this episode is that he did want to make it out like it was just a normal Doctor Who story that just so happened to then have elements of the Time War interjected into it, which sounds like a good idea, but I don't particularly care for that, predominantly because it means then you've got like 2 different ideas that don't particularly coherently join together, and that there's no cohesion to me personally when I was listening to this. However, I did enjoy it more on a second viewing over my first viewing. First listen I really didn't like this box set. Second listen I did like it slightly better, or a little bit more, but not enough to change the actual rating. So I mean, I discussed this episode quite a bit with my friend Michael last time I was back over at his, and we both discussed about the fact that we didn't particularly care for this story that much, and it was very interesting though, because he made a very valid point that like the 8th Doctor, and or just the Doctor generally, his relationship to time is almost like Spider-Man's Spidey sense, which I really like. And that however, I genuinely don't like this story that much. The companion sort of thing, like the companions disappear and that in the story, and Bliss is okay, I guess, and the 8th Doctor is decent and that, but McGann's okay in this story and that, but I think he shines later on in the story, as does Bliss, and I think for the first sort of episode of this box set. I think it's a weak sort of starting point. The foundation of this box set isn't very good. It's not a good setting off point, and that because you've only got like the Daleks in the last sort of 10-15 minutes. You've got like a Time Lord crashing into the Theus fairly early on-ish, and the overuse of the sonic screwdriver as well, I might add, is very annoying. And a comment both myself and my friend Michael made, which was that we do feel like the 8th Doctor Time War box sets and or McGann should have probably got his own theme and that, separate from the War Doctor theme, because I don't know why I just expected them to do that, but then they didn't, and it just feels like they cut corners there a little bit. We're just sort of reusing and recycling that theme. Not that I don't like that theme, it's just I associate it more with John Hurt and or the War Doctor, and not so much with the 8th Doctor. But yeah, it was an okay story. There's also the sort of timey-wimey sort of time jumps type thing, as well as this troll creature, and then, as I said, the sort of time war. So it's got 3 different ideas and concepts. It just doesn't develop any of them fully, because it's as soon as it sort of gets to a certain point, it drops one idea and then goes to the next one, and then drops that one and then goes to the next one. So overall, I give Starship of Theus a 5 out of 10. Moving on to Echoes of War, written by Matt Fitton. You have a Dalek there in the middle, then you've got like this decaying forest on the right of the Dalek, with a Dalek saucer there, almost like a bolt of electricity there, and then this sort of forest as well on its left, as well as this Gallifreyan soldier who's just completely covered in moss. You've still got the banner, you've got the 8th Doctor there, and then you've got, Doctor Who, the 8th Doctor Time War, Echoes of War by Matt Fitton. You've got some more Dalek saucers in the background, as well as Bliss and the 8th Doctor, as well as what seem to be maybe some cogs as well in the background there, as well as some lasers and whatnot. So yeah, Echoes of War was definitely an improvement over Starship of Theus. Both the world and the character of Bliss as well was much more interesting. It starts to sort of actually have some more Daleks, or well, not even more Daleks, but just be more Dalek-centric and that. And what they do with the Dalek in this episode is very interesting to me. I won't give anything away, but it is very interesting, as well as the setting as well. And it shows the sort of brutality and the sort of hectic, bad nature of the Time War, with how the Time War and all the Time Lords and Dalek weaponry can affect planets and people who aren't even involved or interested in fighting in this war and that. And yeah, it's got this interesting concept with this planet, as well as I say, the Dalek. The 8th Doctor's okay. Again, I think he shines later on much better in the next story, I think. I think from what I remember as well, the whole sonic screwdriver thing is toned down quite a bit in this story, which is good. As I say, I think Bliss definitely has quite a bit more to do here, and has even moments to shine when she's sort of almost taken, almost having to take charge and or be the leader when something happens to the Doctor. Later on in the story, and that Bliss almost has, as I say, like an opportunity to rise to the occasion, and I think she meets that she meets that demand of the story. And I gave Echoes of War, originally I gave it a 9 out of 10, but I did lower it down to an 8 out of 10 in the end. So yeah, still stronger and a better story than Starship of Theus, but not quite the best story ever. Moving on to the 3rd episode of the 8th Doctor Time War box set, the Conscript, written by Matt Fitton. You have Cardinal Elistra in the middle there, with this sort of bloom, sort of flower sort of thing, as well as a bunch of Dalek ships and a planet in the background, as well as like this Gallifreyan soldier, as well as this sort of nice red sort of banner, or like bit of sort of colour across as well, which is nice, I guess, giving it this sort of pinkish, sort of reddish sort of motif, and that, which is really nice. You've still got the banner there, though, with all the information and stuff, as well. The conscript, I like the connection, like, Echoes of War ends with Cardinal Illustra in Echoes of War, which I didn't realise, or I didn't know that going in, which I liked. And then, as I say, Cardinal Illustra, it sort of continues nicely into this sort of episode where it's a simple episode, but it's just so well executed. I think that's what I like about the Conscript by Matt Fitton. It's set in this sort of war camp, well, not war camp, sorry, training camp, and the idea is that the Doctor's there, and obviously the military are trying to sort of put him in his line and that, and put him in line, and it's just really interesting, the different sort of things that get said in this episode as well. Like, the Doctor is confronted with the army general and that, and it's quite interesting to see him butt up against this sort of authority figure and that. And yeah, I think one thing that I did prefer about Echoes of War is that it actually had obviously quite a bit of a focus on the Dalek or Daleks and that, or this one Dalek and that, whereas Starship Theus only had the Daleks in a little bit at the tail end. And I think the Conscript almost does a similar thing to Starship Theus, with where it's very much has the Daleks at the tail end and that, but as I say, I think you get a better idea of why the Doctor's maybe not taking up arms with the Gallifreyans and the Time Lords and that, and yeah, it's quite interesting, as I say, to see him put up against these sort of army generals and that. And oh, actually, also another thing about Echoes of War I've just remembered is the ending, and that is quite shocking as well. Actually, I was quite like, oh my god, when they did a certain thing to a certain character at the end, which if you've seen the episode, you'll know what I'm on about. I'm trying to keep these reviews of all 4 of the episodes as spoiler free as possible here. So yeah, Conscript is, as I say, very simplistic but very effective. Cardinal Illustra is really cool. Maybe she could have been in this story a bit more. There is a scene where the Sonic gets destroyed and that, which I thought was very devastating, kind of reminiscent of the Visitation with the 5th Doctor. And that, McGann, his performance is probably the best in this story and that, as well as in the next story. I think for the first 2 episodes he was sort of, it pains me to even suggest this or say this, but maybe phoning it in, or maybe just didn't seem to be as interested with the scripts as much, or didn't seem to be getting into the rhythm of the character specifically for these stories for one reason or another, you know, maybe it was just an off day and that. But as I say, I do definitely think his performance definitely picks up in the Conscript as well as the next story. So yeah, in the end I ended up giving Conscript a 9 out of 10. I also really liked a lot of the side characters and the sort of, as I say, yeah, the different side characters and that, and it was definitely the easiest listen out of the whole box set, as well as the sort of story that went by the quickest, you know, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Moving on to the last episode here, we have One Life, which has 2 characters on the front there, and then you've got the 8th Doctor, as well as some Daleks and a green energy weapon, as well as, if you haven't already noticed in the background, what seems to be the War Doctor TARDIS interior. So yeah, I like to think that in the Time War, towards the latter end of the 8th Doctor's timeline and or life, the TARDIS changes to the sort of War Doctor TARDIS. One Life, as John Dorney so aptly said in the behind the scenes, almost feels like part 2 of Starship Atheus. And although it is still quite timey-wimey, it's a lot more interesting and I don't know, I still found it difficult to follow, but it was definitely interesting. There was definitely some decent concepts and ideas, but it was just let down by the execution. I think some of the ideas and executions of episodes in, say, the Matt Fitton episodes were a bit more just overall successful, and maybe because they were a bit more smaller scale, or maybe because he refined the ideas a bit more, or maybe he had more time, I don't know. But as I say, I think with the John Dorney episodes, they just seem to be a bit more rushed, a bit more sort of all over the place maybe, and not as refined. Not that all of the ideas aren't good, or any of the ideas aren't good, but, you know, I think you've got this interesting idea with this locket as well, which is almost very reminiscent of the Series 3 finale with the Master, which they even make like a reference to almost, which I thought was really nice. And then, yeah, it does feel like it sort of tries to, from what I remember of the episode, conclude this box set and that, so that if you were to just buy this one box set, then you would be fine. It would be a sufficient ending. You don't have to almost pick up the next box set and that, but there is another box set after this one, so yeah. Yeah, I mean, it probably feels like the biggest sort of, for lack of a better term, epic and sort of big scale sort of Time War story out of the 4, and that, I think, as well. Like, it's the one with the most sort of stakes with the Daleks on the Doctor and gang, or Doctor and co. The Daleks are consistently a presence and or on their backs and on their tail, as it were. So yeah, in the end, I ended up giving One Life a 7 out of 10. So overall, out of 40, I ended up giving this Time War box set, or the 8th Doctor Time War box set, I ended up giving it a 29 out of 40, which is kind of funny because that's the same score I ended up giving the Jenny box set. However, I would say that I, of course, enjoyed this much more than the Jenny box set. However, out of the 3 box sets that I have reviewed so far on the channel, I would actually say the Gallifrey Time War box set Volume 1 is probably the better story, which kinda is a bit odd, and it irks me a little bit admitting that here on the YouTube channel, because I obviously prefer this box set because, I don't prefer this box set, but it irks me because that box set doesn't feature the Doctor, whereas this one does. But as I say, I don't feel like McGann don't feel like he's really sort of fully, you know, embracing all of the scripts or all of the Doctor-ness that I'm used to until sort of halfway through, personally. And that he seems like he's just going through the motions, as I say, in the first 2 stories, and then 3 and 4, he definitely pulls it out of the bag. Bliss is okay, but she doesn't really get much to do in the conscript, nor does she have that much. She does some stuff in One Life, but that, as I say, that almost gets diminished because it's trying to tie in with Starship Atheus and with a plot twist that they're going with, as I say, with character from Starship Atheus. But Starship Atheus just didn't have that interesting a side character or side cast anyway. I think the best side cast in terms of these 4 stories is probably, again, the conscript and that. And I mean, and maybe even Echoes of War, but then that's just a continuation of the refugees from Starship Atheus. I do like the idea of I do like the idea of the refugees in the first place, because it's a very good idea and concept to be able to get the 8th Doctor into the war, because obviously he's not in the middle of it because he doesn't want to fight. So how do you get him into fighting in the Time War, or at least going even near it? You put some innocent people in the frame and then he's there. So yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, overall I gave this box set, the Time War 8th Doctor Time War box set Volume 1, a 29 out of 40. Thanks for watching, comment, rate and subscribe.